Think about a problem that you have in your life, an emotional or behavioral challenge. Were you born that way, or did you learn it? I'm Todd Goodwin, and I want to address this important question. Over the years, I've seen thousands of people in my practice as a hypnotist presenting issues ranging from an emotional challenge like stress or anxiety, grief or anger or resentment, low self-esteem, lack of motivation, to behavioral compulsions like smoking or overeating or drinking too much. In all of these cases, and I can say this with a very high degree of confidence, there have been very, 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 very few exceptions. In almost every case, those problems have been learned. So when you think about a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, who learns new words and learns how to speak and communicate what they want to say, when was the last time you saw a 2 or 3-year-old who had a fear of public speaking? It almost never happens. And how many 2 or 3-year-olds had a fear of getting on an airplane or even a fear of a cockroach or a dog or a lizard? It almost never happens. And certainly we know that no child is born with this emotional craving for cigarettes or alcohol or even junk food. And if someone didn't learn to behave that way, they would not have had a predisposition. So in all of these issues, it's important to realize that they're learned. And anything that you learned, you can unlearn. We go through life and we're constantly exposed to a variety of stimulation through our senses and through our imagination. We're experiencing different things physically and emotionally. And starting from even before birth in the womb, we begin to form connections and we begin to learn certain things even at a level we're not aware of. In fact, most learning is subconscious, which means it's happening without your awareness. What happens is later on in life, at some point, when we realize we have a problem, whether it's a fear or an addictive tendency, could be a relationship challenge, whatever it is, we then wonder, how did I get this? Sometimes we blame it on a person or a substance. Sometimes we blame it on our genes. There's the old joke. This overweight person goes to his doctor and he says, "Doctor, I can't seem to lose weight." And the doctor looks at him and says, "Well, what seems to be the problem?" And the patient says, "Well, the problem is that obesity runs in my family." And the doctor corrects him and said, "No, the problem is that nobody runs in your family." And so when we think about things like obesity, anxiety, and in some cases, addictions, a very small percentage of those incidents are caused by real genetic heredity. Most of it is inherited or learned based on the social structure of the family and based on the individual who's experiencing that challenge, their past experiences. So it's important to realize that if you were born with a fairly clean slate and through life you learned certain things that created challenges for you, that the solution to changing that situation and fixing that challenge, fixing your problem, solving it, is done by unlearning. And when you have a behavior or an emotional challenge, those are just symptoms of something that you think. The way that you think could be a memory or a belief. It could be an image or a series of words. It could be something that you experienced or something you were taught. And in many cases, you learned it without ever being aware you were. Now, you don't have to be aware of what the actual origin of that situation was. As a hypnotist, when I work with people, we don't always have to know where the person learned to be afraid or to be codependent in a relationship or where they were actually traumatized. If the person knows, that's great, and it can be helpful. But the important thing to realize is that if you learned something in the past that's causing you a problem today, it's not the past experience that's to blame, but the belief or the perception that you have from that point forward. So in other words, if something happened to you when you were 5 years old, and from that point on you had some dysfunctional pattern in your life, it's not what happened when you were 5 that is to blame. It's what you learned what you came to believe about yourself and the world as a result of that experience. Since we can't change the past and we can only work in the present moment, the key is to figuring out what is it that's stopping you today. And if you're able to create a compulsive desire to engage in this unhealthy behavior, or if you're able to create fear automatically, that means there has to be something you're thinking that you have made a habit and you've conditioned yourself into that way of thinking and feeling. And that's something that you're doing every day. So the way to solve it is to unlearn it. Once that's done, all the symptoms, emotionally and behaviorally, that come from it are gone, and then you're free. So it's a different way maybe for you to think about your challenge or your issue. Hopefully it gives you some degree of optimism that you can overcome it. If you were born with it and it's in your genes, you're pretty much stuck with it. But in most cases, that's not the case. Fortunately, you learned it, which means all you have to do is change that underlying thought to unlearn it and restore your natural birthright to feel empowered, to feel confident, and to be fulfilled in your life. So think about that for a while and have a great day.